Let's bring in now former Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Scott, thank you very much for joining us. Great to see you. Do you agree this is true leadership from President Trump in taking the necessary action to eliminate the nuclear threat from Iran?
Yes, I do. This is something that presidents have been seeking to achieve. That is the destruction of Iran's nuclear capabilities for decades. And, they've tried diplomacy over and over again. The JCPOA, which was, as President Trump described it many years ago when I was Prime Minister, is a bad deal. It was a bad deal. It wasn't achieving that deal. Some years later, October 7, we saw the most vile defilement of a nation in what occurred to the Jewish people on that day, the worst day since the Holocaust. And, what we've seen now is finally, after the fall of Hamas, after the fall of Hezbollah, and along the way there was the fall of the Assad regime, and now the Iranian regime hangs by a thread. And I think it's extraordinary what he's been able to do. And it wasn't an easy thing to do. It wasn't something he rushed to do. It's not his preferred option, but he was prepared to take the action, and I think he should be commended for it.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And it's not just the Democrats who are saying he should be impeached, but there's even critics within his own party who are mounting the argument that America shouldn't be involved in a foreign war. They say it's not their war. But Scott Morrison, what threat does Iran pose to the West, even Australia, not just Israel?
When I was PM, I talked about an arc of autocracy that went all the way from Pyongyang to Tehran and took in Beijing and, of course, took in Moscow. And Iran have been an important part of that arc. And they have worked together, as we saw in Ukraine. I mean, the Iranians working together, what was happening in Ukraine. We've seen them swapping notes, encouraging each other. We've got the Iranian foreign minister who's ducked off to Moscow, and we've got the Chinese government, which is criticising the United States. They're swapping notes and they're working together, and they've been doing it for some time. And this is a very significant blow to that arc, I believe. And I think when you just stop and think about the fact that Iran's nuclear capability has been destroyed. I mean, that is a Middle East game changer. And not just for Israel, but I think it is the opportunity to create a stability in the Middle East that'll be welcomed by Gulf countries, and to ensure that they can return to pursuing peace for their own countries, for commerce, for engagement, for all of these sorts of things. I think this is potentially a major turning point for the Middle East after so many decades of where it's just been a woeful tale of despair.
So well said. I couldn't agree with you more. And I wish more of that sentiment was reflected in the media and in political commentary. Now, Scott Morrison, I have to ask you this. If you were Prime Minister right now, would you have taken over 24 hours to come out and express support for America's strikes against Iran?
No. And there was no need for it to take that long. And of course, you would have taken advice in terms of what had actually happened and where it had happened and what had been the nature of the strikes and what intelligence that we have and what had we been informed of by our allies and so on. And that's quite reasonable. If it was necessary, I would have convened the National Security Committee on the Sunday, if it was indeed necessary, for the simple sake of actually being able to make a statement as Prime Minister. That potentially could have been done just simply between the Minister for Defence and the Minister for Foreign Affairs. But if the Prime Minister wishes to do that with a full National Security Committee, that's fair enough. And that should have been convened on a Sunday. I can't remember how many National Security Committee meetings I've convened on Sundays and Saturdays and all sorts of hours, given the issues we were dealing with at the time. So it's not irregular. Our national security officials are not shocked to be called at short notice to attend the National Security Committee. And it was significant. It was a moment of opportunity, I think, for Australia to make a very clear statement. And I must admit, when I was asked about this yesterday, Sharri, it wasn't really something I was looking to get engaged with publicly. But there's been so much ambiguity about the government's position on the Middle East and on Israel and October 7. And honestly, that ambiguity must cease. I mean, surely now, we can have a clear position and understand that what the United States is doing is the right thing to do. And the other thing I'd say is this, Sharri.
I mean, but this is your message to the Albanese government now. You're saying stop being ambiguous when it comes to foreign policy, support our allies. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Of course. I mean, for those who want to live in the fairyland that thinks that without an alliance with the United States, we somehow have a defence arrangement, that somehow Australia would be the only country other than the United States that would be able to resist the type of potential offence that would be levelled at Australia and do it in isolation. This is absolute la-la land. The United States is our most important ally. And whether it was the Howard government or was with my government, whether it was during times of the Rudd government, the Gillard government, there was an instinctive alignment with the United States. And I can't tell you why he waited until today before saying something. I don't know the answer to that question. Was it to align with what other governments like the UK and Canada and to align with their messaging? I don't know. Perhaps it was. Perhaps it wasn't. But, if you're the United States and you take an action like this, and it wouldn't have been an easy call for the president. This is not something he would have been rushing to do, itching to do. But you'd want to know your allies were with you.
100%.
And how hard is it to go, well done, Mr. President, on taking out the nuclear capabilities of a despotic, authoritarian regime that, imposes all sorts of extinguishment of liberties on their own people.
Should be
this
the
is
easiest
apparently
thing
a
to
regime
say.
that should be, we need to be careful about offending.
I mean, it's the most uncontroversial thing to say. Scott Morrison, we miss your moral clarity more than I can say. Thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Nice to talk to you, Sharri, and good for you too.
Thank you.